Okay. Well, hey, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. April West, followed by Dr. Maria Malayter. We've teamed up today to speak on leading organizational change with the brain in mind with neuroleadership. Basic scope is unleashing the power of your brain, right? We're going to talk about, you know, what does critically thinking look like? What does navigating through uncertainty look like? You know, how do we get through all of the various changes that we are all partaking in? And I'm pretty sure if it's not me, it's somebody else that's been like, whoo, I feel like a roller coaster lately with all the darn changes. And the uncertainty, some really matters of uncertainty. So I'm going to go ahead and give the floor to Dr. Malayter to go ahead and take us off on this adventure.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dr. West. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oh, always looking for where that is. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this important topic of change. So this is a neuro leadership approach. So that is the part of it is the work of David Rock, and he studied neuro leadership for a long time. And it's really important as a leader to know what's going on with people's brains as you're leading or as changes occur in organizations. So let's start moving forward. So we're going to talk about understanding change in relationship to the brain. Uh, you know, you could think through this yourself. Think about changes that you've made and how that may have disrupted your life or brought you to a new growth perspective. We're going to talk about David Rock's SCARF model and then also a little bit about leading teams through change. So we have to think about the thought patterns and how we learn. And change is a learning process for the leader and all the people involved. So, what's going on as we're thinking? Well, an average person has 60,000 thoughts, and 80% of them are negative. How many people knew that? Yes, no? So, 48,000 of those thoughts are negative and 12,000 are positive. So when a leader is thinking about as they're going through change, they have to keep that in mind. The automatic part of going to the negative instead of the positive. So the leader needs to think about how they can manage that for themselves and like leading in a way that it helps everyone in the organization understand to work through those negative thoughts and to move on to the positive side to have a growth mindset. So this is an interesting consideration, and it relates to how people kind of experience threats. And as human beings, we're wired to look at things as threats. And that's why we have this negative bias. So there's a negativity bias, and it's more focused on the threats, as I said a moment ago, and the negative stimuli. So sometimes it could be a sunny day out, but what could go bad with that? Well, I like sunny days, but it's just a matter of what else. It's like looking at the situation and thinking what could go wrong. And when change initiatives are happening, people are thinking about what could go wrong. Then there's repetitive thoughts. And that sometimes a person will create a narrative of a negative note and it continues to be repetitive. So it's important as a leader to think about what are the narratives that they're creating as they're going to lead change. So how do they build the vision? How do they communicate all the stories and to make sure that everyone feels safe in that environmental or in that organizational change. So that's what the leader has to be busy doing, or the people that are all involved in the change process. And it's important to involve everyone. So let's look at the power of change in the brain and how you can think this through in a different way. Thinking about how we respond to change. So naturally, as I said before, it activates a threat response. And so that ends up people operating a different way, a bit more defensive, a bit more, how is this negatively going to impact me? It can help that, or not help, but it causes them to get disrupted in their decision making because they're focusing on the negative, the 80% negative thoughts. It creates stress in the organization and also cognitive performance. So when someone's operating in this negative thinking and also the stress from going through a change, thinking, how does this impact my life? That impacts their performance at work and their cognitive performance. So it's a matter of how do you also kind of keep a well organization while you're moving through change. Also, what's challenging as the brain is thinking about change, it's thinking about the uncertainty of it. And so sometimes that'll throw off people in their emotional regulation. So someone who may be an even keel team player may be uh, easily distracted. They could become easily angry or snappy or sarcastic as the change is going on because they're responding to the uncertainty. People like certainty. I know we live in a little bit of an uncertain world, so that's a little hard to create in organizations, but it's really about managing the narrative for people in the organization. So let's talk a little bit about the team dynamics in the change process. So you really have to pay attention to the group dynamics of what's going on in the organization during team dynamics. You certainly will want to build up as a leader allies for the change. You will also want to make sure that you are listening to the driving and resisting forces of the change that's being promoted, the change that's coming. So it's important to pay attention to the resisting forces. And those are the people that are looking at the situation from their vantage point, and you want to hear what they see could go wrong, because this can ultimately help the overall change. So usually someone who is like not disrupting change, but they have a good point that could help the change move forward in a positive way, make it push through. So you want to listen to those resisting forces because there's usually something in those ideas that you can learn from. So it's almost using the term when you're listening to that as a leader, yes, and. So there's usually something good, and then you continue the conversation. So you're opening up the team dynamics by allowing people to express their ideas, both on the we should do this change or we should not do this change. A huge part of driving change as a leader is building up the trust. So making sure people feel seen or listened to, any ways that you can build up trust, say what you're going to do and then follow through and do it, because that will help the whole change process. Then you want to support and build up resiliency. And part of that is just acknowledging with your team what other kind of changes you endured and how those were successful. So it's the term resiliency sometimes is bouncing back. How did people adapt? So making sure that people remember that they adapted. And I always think about, we are really experiencing change all the time now. But one that most people experience is maybe when there's a software update or when you have to change cell phones. You're adapting to change all the time. It's just what are your own personal strategies for doing that and how you can help others see their own strategies for bouncing back and moving forward. And I already talked quite a bit about managing the resistance effectively. It's important to hear the people out, but not get stuck to create an overall negative narrative. It's a matter of gathering the information that is, I guess, additional information to help make sure that the change moves through in a smooth way, or that it does move through, and the positive ways it'll impact people and the bottom line. So, but paying attention to people resisting is very important. Building trust is important. And then building that culture where people bounce back. The other part of this is that people need to, if there is a mistake that goes through the change, is they need to look at it as a learning lesson and build a culture around that. How are we learning through this change? And some people like Amy Edmondson will say, how are you failing forward? So it's an intelligent failure as you're moving through change and what's working and what's not. So failing forward is important in building a culture that mistakes are okay. So now let's think about how we lead with the brain in mind, specifically the SCARF model. I'm sure people have heard about this radio station called WIFM. What's in it for me? I'm sure you've heard that or you know that about yourself already, that you have that going on. What's in it for me? So let's look at how the SCARF model can help us with that. David Rock has studied neuroleadership for a long time, and he has this SCARF model. So when change is coming, any kind of change, people are thinking about what will their status be in the organization? What are the pieces that are certainty that'll continue? So how do we get to certainty in the change? Then the A stands for autonomy, is how can I independently do my work well within this change? And what will I want to know what I will still be responsible for or how my responsibilities might change. Then R is for relatedness, and that is how the whole team is working together and making sure that people feel included and seen during the change process. And finally, F for fairness. So when you're thinking about the SCARF model, I could think about when there's mergers and acquisitions. You walk in and there's two vice presidents of HR. They're thinking, well, where is this going to go? So thinking about this as you're doing a merger per se, is how can you think through these categories for that change? How can you help the team members see where are they going to be sitting in the organization? What's the certainty of their position and their definite roles in the organization? How do people relate and communicate with each other? And is this change fair? So those are some of the bigger ideas to think about in the SCARF model when you're approaching change. And under Neuroleadership and David Rock's model. So back to that radio station, what's in it for me is I want to know those things. And I'm sure you would want to know too. So thinking it through, I know when I've pushed through change initiatives, I didn't have this model, and I'm thinking all the different ways I could have led change differently by assuring people positions are safe. Here is the way we're defining the roles, gathering the input so people are feeling it included. And also, how is this going to be fair across the team? So it's a great model to think about how you can help people move through change and thinking about their brain and keeping that in mind, because this is what they're thinking as they're going through change. So here are some of the practical strategies for leading through change. Definitely communication is key. Creating those patterns that don't create a threat response, because when a person's in threat, it just makes it challenging. So it's continually being open with communication, letting people know their part in the change, helping people work through the new habits and routines. That's where resilience comes in, because maybe you always had a Tuesday at 10 a.m. meeting, and maybe that's going to shift. So then how do people change their workflow? How do they get into the new habits or routines? Again, thinking about emotional regulation. When someone's in a threat state, they may not be doing their best performance. So it's just understanding where people are coming from, acknowledging them, seeing them. It's important to create feedback loops, talking with people as they're going through the change or as you're presenting the change to get all the feedback to help support moving the change forward. And of course, celebrating the wins, because people like to feel that they achieve things, and celebrating each of the wins and taking maybe the change project in different sections and celebrating each time, that helps people feel acknowledged and rewarded and keeps the project energy moving forward. So we want to think about how in change there is an emotional component. So we don't, as we're leading change, we want to not place people in kind of a threat state. And we want to think about those emotions that are attached with it. We want to use the SCARF model and think about status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And then definitely managing the team dynamics. And that'll be just thinking about all the different ways that you can help the transition move forward, help with resiliency, paying attention to the team members and yourself as the leader, because that's important too. So there's just different ways and ways to lead through change. And so I wanted to bring this forward to you. Think about people on the team and yourself, your brain, keep that at center focus as you're moving through change. And that's what I think is really important, and something that I know I didn't learn early on, of how change really disrupts people's emotions, and how I can help be a better leader by communicating differently through change. So, Dr. West, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for this opportunity and to talk about change. So, what questions do people have or want to talk about any of the topics?
Well, thank you, Dr. Malayter. So one of the questions that I do have that I want to bring to our attention from a practical standpoint is, I know you spoke on several different examples in regards to neuroleadership and change, but one of the questions that I have that stands out for me, and it might be for others, is that what's an underutilized neuroscience principle that leaders should be paying more or closer attention to, especially under all of the different uncertainty and changes that are being taken place within organizations or of oneself?
So I think the first part is really to acknowledge that change is an emotional process, and there is also the element of grieving that goes with change. So we're adapting. The practical piece is, I definitely wanted you to think about what are some of the triggers that you might have to change, because that will activate certain emotions. So is it thinking about, what will my status be? And then, if I notice that as a pattern, then how am I going to regulate myself? How can I even help people with different apps, phone apps that people have for de-stressing? So, or calming down their stress levels, like different breathing ones, or even working with gratitude as far as being able to work with those emotions. I think also identifying, and I think the number one thing is helping people identify a little bit about the emotions, because they're probably not aware that that's standing in the way too.
That was really good. I really put down grieving is a piece of it, right? So, for example, for grieving, sometimes we don't think, especially when we're in the organization, right? And there's changes happening and folks are being laid off or being furloughed or whatever the case may be, or just a status change. We don't think about grieving as a piece of it, right? We connect grieving to someone passing, or it could be a relationship status or whatever the case may be, but we never think about grieving within the workplace, or within an organizational standpoint. So I really did write that down, and just to peel it off like an onion, right? Within uncertainty, sometimes we have to take a step back and we have to really dissect on what's really triggering us, what's really making us emotional, imbalance, right? And all the things above. Mm-hmm. So I wrote that down. That was deep. And then change is obviously the process. We do not like change. We are humans of structure and norm. We don't like change. We don't like to be messed with. So I really do appreciate that from that standpoint. I have so many other questions. Anybody else have any questions? I'll keep going because I love
Well,
this.
I think that I think, and I'm going to say this, is that I think that we're a little more startled since the pandemic, and
For
we
real.
really haven't acknowledged that in organizations. So I say startled is that we sat and we lived through a huge threat, so we're going to have a little more of that still residual when a country goes through a collective, you know, difficult situation. How did you bounce back? And then, really acknowledging different things that you respond to. Like if someone sneezes in the room, are you going to sit by them? I don't know, you know, or someone's coughing. And I know that's probably not the best example, but that's still an underlying thing going on.
Yeah.
I never look. I guess I put my thumb up, right? Raise my hand.
There you go.
There you go.
This, but
Love it.
Oh, I put too many up. Okay. But for me, I never thought about the change in the aspect of grieving.
Yeah.
I never thought
Yeah.
about that.
Steve.
So to hear you say that, I'm like, wow, because it is kind of like you're putting to death whatever you had been doing and, letting something go. But I never looked at it as grieving. That was just kind of grabbing for me. Even being a social worker, I'm like, I never looked at change in the office as a part of staff could be grieving, letting go of something that they've come accustomed to doing. Even if it was wrong, still, it still may be some grieving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe some of those things pop up for you now if there's something that you remember that was grieving. I know when there's some changes in personnel in an organization I was in, I really miss those folks because they weren't in my operational cycle anymore. I mean, I could still see them, but I wasn't engaging with them as much, and so I definitely miss them. When they had to work on a different project. But yeah, thank you for both acknowledging that. But that's something I think I know that more people need to talk about that change aspect of the grieving process. And that's where it ties in with the emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another question.
Yes.
How can a leader use neuroscience to drive change? How can a leader use neuroscience to drive change?
So if you're coming from this perspective and knowing that it's going to be emotional, the big part is figuring out the way and creating a vision for how the certainty is going to look like. Where people know where they're going to land and leading with the certainty, not just a lofty vision, but just kind of the idea of here's how we see the certainty of this change working out, and here's how it impacts you. So it does take some time to definitely look at all the systems a change impacts. And a lot of leaders miss that. They don't look at the whole system. So thinking the system and then playing it through, which is a lot of pre-work, but it's important to move the change effectively. Thinking about people will be emotional, they want to know their status and how it impacts their job. And then what is the certain future that we're going for? So then they have a roadmap. So using neuroleadership that way is kind of thinking about how people might feel threatened and then coming up with, here's the roadmaps that we've looked at it this way. Here's how that would play out as we make this change in the end. It's a lot. I sometimes people just create change and not do the pre-work, which is challenging.
So is that kind of like building a psychological safety?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, so it is the psychological safety where you're allowing people to speak up, we're considering this hit, and then also the failure part, that if we do have a mistake along the way, it's okay. So yes, that psychological safety around it. So where it it's the huge part of the communication and building trust, and like you said, the psychological safety of it, but also if there is a mistake, how do we bounce back in that? And that it's okay. Thanks for bringing up psychological safety. I love it.
Thank
And and Amy Edmondson, she has the new book that she has out is the right kind of wrong, and it's how you learn through mistakes and how organizations can build a culture around that. Which change will have some misdirections, and so you need to have the resilience kind of, or the trust built in the team, and the psychological safety.
Who's the author of that book?
So it's Amy Edmondson, and I'm trying to think, it's been released within the past year, so she has a lot out there in YouTube videos. And if you follow her on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of it too, because she'll be on different podcasts. So I saw her at the Global Leadership Summit in August, and it was great just to hear her perspective around it. Any other thoughts, additional questions?
Yes.
Yes.
We're gonna
Okay,
continue with
go.
this. This is good. So the next question that I have is, what's a quick brain-based hack for leaders to make difficult conversations less stressful? Right. So when we are in those HR meetings, or we have a high rated employee, or we about to fire or furlough or lay off folks, or in my case, I have students and parents who could be high rate of all the different changes and challenges that they might be embarking and taking place, such as ICE. I've had that recently happen and occurred on several occasions. How do we, how would can I get some help?
Sure.
I need a quick brain-based hack for having difficult conversations and how having to ease it. Is it a magic wand that I could put over it to make it less stressful?
Well, I mean, the magic wand kind of aligns with the communication. Is I want you to be successful. I want this situation to be successful. And you're painting the picture of how you want it to be successful and how you're going to assist with that success. So setting that expectation at the beginning of the conversation is really important. So instead of jumping right in, just affirming and saying, here's the positive path, or here's the path that I see. So there's clarity right at the beginning to just say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's how I'm looking for your student to be successful, or, or your next step on your career, where I think it's heading. And you set a stage again for, I'm supporting you. Here's the vision. So they have a little bit of certainty, and then move into the conversation. I'm not saying that's going to erase all the defensiveness, but it's going to be starting the conversation that way. And you could probably even ask a coaching question, like, is this the picture that you're, you know, thinking of too? So you're kind of building an alliance.
Trying to unmute. No, that's good. I put down I'm supporting you, because oftentimes, especially right now, of all of the different uncertainty, a lot of folks are on edge. A lot of students are on edge. And so I'm just trying to gather as much resources and community resources to support our students and our staff and in our community at large. By just letting them know that, okay, these are the resources. You do have to do the work. Nothing's about to be given to you. This is the time in the season to let's, hone down and come together. And usually and oftentimes what I'm seeing, and in my little duration of lifetime, is that when we are going through a climate crisis or any type of crisis, we as humans can tend together to come together. For example, look at the climate crisis that happened in LA with all the fires and how folks just came together and still coming together.
Mhm.
I mean, hosting concerts, fundraisings, like just the amounts of different food drives and clothes drives. Because of all that major change that happened and occurred, look how significant humans came together, right?
Mhm.
So I did put down there of supporting, like, what does support look like during the duration of change? And I hate to say it, but sometimes it's always what is catastrophic or a major change is when we as the human body come together. So I did write that down.
Mhm.
Let me see. I think I have one more. Um, how can organizations create an environment that fosters a growth mindset from a neuroscience perspective? So, how can organizations create an environment that fosters a growth mindset from a neuroscience perspective?
So I think part of it is even like educating people a little bit about growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so things didn't go a certain way they wanted it to. But
Mm-hmm.
then what is framing it to what is the gift or opportunity out of it, or what are the other ways we can look at this situation?
Yeah.
So again, it's kind of still pulling people in to say, like, we still have something else. This is not the end. This is, there's another opportunity out of here, and kind of helping people understand that it's okay to think and look at other opportunities. Opportunity meaning, what's the different way we can solve this problem? So it's
Mm-hmm.
really about kind of teaching people the growth mindset thinking in the organization,
Yeah.
and how and tracking it back to saying, like, sometimes people, there are aspects of change people do like, but it's just that you get and move through change and you can see how there were different paths you could take. So even just helping people understand that there's not one way to go in a change situation or any kind of situation, like, how can you look at it from a different perspective? So
Mm-hmm.
almost helping people talk through what are all the different perspectives you could look at this situation, and what are the different ways we can look at it from a growth mindset, meaning, you know, possibly what could we learn, or what's a different way of doing business. And you can think about, I guess what's popping up to my mind is thinking about mistakes that turned into a growth mindset. I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure that post-it notes were an accident. So they
Yeah.
were. They were an accident. So that's one of those situations that if they were, if they threw everything out, we wouldn't have post-it notes.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of how do you kind of weave in, I guess, growth mindset and innovation. What's a different way of doing this?
Yeah. That's good. Okay. Any other takeaways or any other feedback? Go ahead.
I have another question. How do you think the emotional intelligence of the leader play in this neuroscience change?
I love that question. I love that question because that's the one thing that sometimes they put emotional intelligence in different business schools and all that, but a leader still has to continually learn about emotional intelligence because they have to be able to have the skills to have empathy, to even understand and hear what's going on in their teams, to be relatable. So I think leaders, I'm biased. I'm very biased. I think emotional intelligence is a mental fitness skill, and that I think people need to practice that all the time so they can be most present with their people. And so that's where emotional intelligence comes in, is practicing the skill of emotional intelligence. So uh, sometimes the leader can get too busy and then they're not paying attention. And this is kind of happening with a lot of organizations where their people aren't being seen or heard because maybe they're in remote environments. But so there has to be a thought process and an intentionality of I'm going to work on my own emotional intelligence to know how to display empathy, or also to be aware of my own self-awareness. For instance, uh, there sometimes are barriers that leaders have that they do not know until they do more self-awareness, and how some of their actions can be driven by those barriers. And so I'll give myself as an example, and it's really helped my own emotional intelligence. Is one of my barriers is that I'm a high achiever, and that's a saboteur in my life. So I've had to really learn more about how to stop that. Where I in the past would push change really quickly and not pay attention to other people. Uh Self-serving, I'm just going to be honest. And but now that I've learned more about my own kind of saboteur and my own emotional intelligence level, and I wasn't thinking about the brain in that change situation, uh, I would run it differently, and I would definitely pay more attention to how it impacts others. But it takes time. I think all leaders need to work on their own constant professional development, and especially around emotional intelligence. That was a long answer for you. What'd you think over there?
Yeah, you know, as you were talking, I think I operate more on a solution focus.
Mhm.
And when I see a situation is not going right, I immediately start thinking of this is not working. How can we change it? How can we make it right? How can we make it better? Not really realizing that people are not able to shift as readily as I am. For me, it's make it make sense. And if it's not making sense, why are we continuing to do it? Let's shift. But people who cannot shift as quick, uh, going through the grieving stage, I'm not really even taking that into consideration. But I'm sitting here like, why are these people so defiant? Why they just
Yeah.
won't change? Like
Yeah.
it's not making sense. Let's make it make sense. But so that question of emotional intelligence, for me, just being in tune with how it's causing stress for people, even that change, even though it's change for the better,
Mhm.
you know, it's very stressful period. And, you know, and I take, for example, when COVID hit and the vaccine became more readily available, it was a very stressful time for people because some people did not want to do it, but yet people were contracting it and passing away. So that was a very stress for me. It was like, make it make sense. They got a vaccine. The vaccine can help protect me. I won't die. Da 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 da. Let's do it. Why are we struggling with this change? But it goes back to that neuroscience. You know,
Mhm.
that brain muscle is something else. So, and as a leader, I've had to, even with my clients, um, the Illinois Department of Public Health and Chicago Department of Public Health was in my facility, and I had to go and actually take my vaccine in front of the clients and staff so that they can see me, the leader, doing it, and it led to a better positive acceptance from them.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that was a long explanation, but just it
No,
was.
it's great. It's great because I mean, you're saying and demonstrating that you're going to move forward, and this change, and that, they can then model you
Yeah,
and say, this is not one of those random changes that affects other people. It affects me too.
yeah, yeah,
So, but that was
absolutely.
a great example. I
Yeah,
mean, it's I think sometimes about technology when people don't want to adapt, and technology is going to continue to change. Uh, but even the leader getting adapted to the technology first instead of just pushing it down, it
right.
is a modeling, a
Absolutely.
modeling aspect of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that the leader plays a huge role, their behavior, their disposition and attitude about the change it plays a huge role on how others accept it
Mm-hmm.
versus
Yes.
not accepting it. Yeah. Yep, yep. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. I just want to ask real quick, Mr. Kopp or Adriana, I know that you guys are online. Any other takeaways from you guys? I don't know if they hear us.
So I'm gonna pop off mute here. Yeah, no, this has been great. Thank you so much. Very informative. And I feel like I need to add a DR before my name. I got surrounded by doctors here.
Yeah, cool. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much for your time. I really love the scarf model. I will definitely be using that moving forward in my life. Thank you for your
That's
time,
great.
guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much. Any other takeaways, Dr. Malayter? I know I have another question. I could propose another question, but any other takeaways from your end?
I just think the big part is like, let's pay attention to the emotions. And then as a leader, how you develop the emotional intelligence skills. Because it's practice. It's practice. Because there's that piece of, I want to climb and be successful. But, well, if you're climbing and being successful and the rest of your team isn't going with you, well, that's not an effective change.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I wrote down a couple. One of them stuck out as grieving is a piece of change, right? And how do we handle that? Do the work of emotional intelligence, simply doing the work. I love what Dr. Winston said, make it make sense. As she mentioned, the COVID example, if I am, proposing to be a leader and I'm making the right steps, come on, y'all. But everybody is at different points and stages, and we have to respect everybody's boundaries. But that really stood out. And Adriana mentioned the scarf model. That's an excellent tool to utilize on a daily basis. And just to reflect on, right? We go through changes and of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of our days, right? So that's really deep. And Dr. Kopp, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you.
Just so you know,
yeah.
That was a
Dr.
real
Kopp should know.
quick doctorate right there.
What is it? Dr. Kopp, he's involved in exit strategies for companies. So he deals with change all the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
cool.
threat lockdown is actually something that I've been working on very recently for myself. And so this has been really educational in part how to bring that into a corporate environment. So yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. Very good. And so with that being said, we appreciate everybody for joining us. We're always looking for guest speakers, such as yourself, Dr. Winston, Adriana, Dr. Kopp. Come on through. We are here to foster collaboration to drive impactful change. This is what Dr. Malayter and I is trying to present to the world on a monthly basis. So the third Wednesday of each month. We would love to bring in guest speakers and just to talk about change or something that is impactful. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. We would also reach out to you guys if you're interested to speak on a topic of your choice. And then if you also have additional guest speakers, please share. We would always like to build this platform, especially now that we are going through all of the seasons of change and growth, right? And within change, there's growth. There's a season of growth, innovation. All right. So please join us, come on board. The next topic I would love to present on is handle hard better, right? So lessons in leadership by Duke University women's basketball coach Kara Lawson. She has a phenomenal take on how to handle hard better. So that'll be my spiel for next month. I'll be posting that and bringing that to the public's attention with a cool invite. So please stay on board. Stay tuned. Go ahead, Tanya.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, you're muted.
I was just saying the title, Handle Heart Better.
Oh yeah, it's really good. And
That's a good title.
we're gonna talk about how do we move forward. How can leaders develop mental toughness, embrace challenges, and lead teams through adversity, using the Kara Lawson's philosophy. So I'll put up a short video of her and what her take is and how she's developed this core concept. But it's something that as I mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, how do we reflect back on our day? How do we handle all of the different lessons and hard challenges better? We can do it, right? So just piecemealing that. And I'm excited. I'm excited to continue and develop the grit of becoming a championship in uncertainty.
Oh, you should trademark that.
Right?
Question, is this something that I can have my leadership team to join in
Yes.
on?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Please extend the invite. Because
We may do it as a group.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah. And
anytime,
go ahead.
I was going to say, and anytime you want us to help in other ways, we're happy to do that, because we want to help everybody be chief change agents, like learn how to do it and then help other people. But it's a growing process. It takes time.
Yeah. Even if you need us to come on site, Dr. Winston, we can come on site and do a lunch and learn. And we can, further the platform further for you guys.
Great.
Yeah. So just reach out to us and let us know. But we thank y'all so much. I know I have a 1 o'clock that I got to attend to. So, hey, keep thriving, keep striding, and we will see y'all next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. West.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Dr. Malayter. An amazing, amazing talk.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. West, Dr. Winston, Adriana, and Dr. Kopp, since we've elevated him. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
All right, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.